Hi folks, Harry or Reader of King here. So this is going to be my second video, so I hope you all enjoy it. And today's video is going to be my top 10 favourite Stephen King books. So I wanted to make this video just as sort of a personal video so you can see what kind of books that I like. That's good coffee. That's good. Okay, so I'm going to start with my honourable mentions, which are books that are not necessarily my favourite, but I felt should be shouted out a little bit. So the first book in my honourable mentions is The Shining. So The Shining, I remember absolutely loving reading, but I have watched the movie so many times that if I was to recommend you the book, which I have 2 copies of. If I were to recommend you the book, I would probably just be recommending you the movie. The movie is too familiar in my head. It's a brilliant movie, despite what Stephen King says. I think it's quite good. So yeah, The Shining won't be in my top 10 because I don't remember enough about the book that's different from the film. So the next book on my list of honourable mentions is The Outsider. Now, The Outsider I am currently reading right now. So this is the copy of The Outsider I'm currently reading. It's a full-size paperback compared to this little mass market. I'm on page, let me see, I'm on page 145 and I'm really enjoying it. So the reason this is on my honourable mentions is I believe that this could be on my top 10 once I've finished the book, because I am really enjoying it. So the next book on my list of honourable mentions is kind of in a similar situation to The Shining, where the movie is too familiar in my head, and I feel like if I was recommending you the book, I would be recommending you the movies, because the movies are way too familiar in my head, and that's Carrie. I remember loving Carrie when I read it. It was the second Stephen King book that I ever read after it, and it's really short. This copy right here is only 300 pages, and I've seen copies that are smaller. This is one of Stephen King's shortest. It was also the first book that Stephen King ever published. It wasn't the first book he ever wrote, but it was the first one that was ever published. And it's good, it's a solid novel, but it's just a bit mediocre really. And as I said, I remember the movie far too much. I love both movies, they're both brilliant. But yeah, the book's still pretty good, so I would give it a try if you haven't. So the last book on my list of honourable mentions is actually a trilogy, and when I say trilogy, you probably already know what that is. That is the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. So the Bill Hodges trilogy, or the Mr. Mercedes trilogy, is kind of a detour from the genre that Stephen King usually sticks with. So all of these are crime novels, and they're pretty good. I think, controversially, my favourite one would actually be Finders Keepers, because the concept is actually very similar to my favourite Stephen King book. That probably spoils the #1 spot, but I'll have to deal with that. These are really good books, but I don't think any of them could make my top 10. Okay, so now we are entering my top 10 Stephen King books of all time, and I'm going to start that off with Salem's Lot. Now, Salem's Lot is basically Dracula set in 1975 small town Maine. So this is the second novel that he ever published, and I think it's fair to say that it's pretty good. He manages to turn the story of Dracula into a small town in Maine situation. And you alright? Okay. And it's a classic vampire novel. I can't really think of many faults with it other than it's relatively slow moving. So I think it's pretty good, and it's the only Stephen King book that I've ever read twice. So coming in at number 9 is The Wastelands. Now, The Wastelands is the third book in the Dark Tower series, which is sort of considered his masterpiece, and all of Stephen King's books are connected through the Dark Tower, and although this is the third book in the series, it sort of acts as the first where the journey to the Dark Tower actually begins, because the first book, The Gunslinger, is setting up Roland, the main character, and Jake, another one of the main characters. and sort of setting the scene for the whole series. It's pretty bad. I didn't really like it, but I know a lot of people who have. And then the second book is just introducing more of the characters, the drawing of the three. That's introducing Odetta, or Detta, or Susanna, whatever you want to call her, and also Eddie Dean. So this book is the first book in the series that actually has a little bit of story. And it's pretty good. It's about 550 pages and it's really well paced. I absolutely loved it, and I think when I'm rereading the Dark Tower series after I've finished it, because I've just finished book 4, I'm going to definitely look forward to reading The Wastelands again. So for number 8 on my top 10 favourite Stephen King novels is Gerald's Game. Now this copy of Gerald's Game I have is really old, it's a mass market, and the font is kind of unbearable, just a little bit disgusting, but it's a really, really good book. It's quite short, but it's really, really good. The movie that it was made into in 2017 was absolutely brilliant. It was directed by Mike Flanagan, who also did, I believe, the Haunting of Hill House series and the 2019 adaptation of Doctor Sleep, the sequel to The Shining. It's a really good movie, and the book is probably even better. It is gruesome, it's disgusting, but it's really, really good, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who loves Stephen King's darker work. And it's really scary, in fact, because it's one of those this could happen situations, and those are the Stephen King books that I find to be the scariest, because they are realistic, and that's what makes them scary, because they actually could happen. So coming in at number 7 is Needful Things. Now, I just finished Needful Things a couple of days ago, and it's really long. I believe it's 933 pages, which is the 3rd longest book I have ever read, and it's pretty good. It's really slow moving, but the story is incredible, and I don't think I could find a fault with it apart from the ending, which is really, really disappointing. It's just not the best ending, but we all know that endings aren't really Stephen King's forte, so can't really judge him. But it's a pretty good book, and I rated it 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, so it's good. Coming in at number 6 on my list is Pet Sematary. So Pet Sematary was the 4th Stephen King book that I ever read, and it's really scary. I think it's definitely his most disturbing work. For those of you who don't know, it is based on a real thing that happened to Stephen King and his son Owen, when Owen nearly ran in front of a truck and almost died. And this book takes that idea and spins it way out of control and fully explores the idea of what if that happened. And this book is probably Stephen King's best when it comes to characters and human emotion, because it goes really, really deep into like grief and mourning. It's awful, but it's so well written. Stephen King actually didn't want this originally published because it's so horrifying. That's just a little insight about how scary this one is, because Stephen King originally didn't want it published, and that's saying something. But yeah, Pet Sematary, pretty solid. Coming in at number 5 on my list, if you watched my previous video, you'll probably be expecting this. It is The Institute. Now, I think it's safe to say that with my last video of The Institute, I kind of got a little bit bullied for it because in my last video, every single time I mentioned The Institute, I would hold the book up like this. Actually, 2 of my friends made a parody video of my review of The Institute, and it's really funny. They gave me permission to put this in the video, so that should be playing right now.
Hello everyone, this is my review of Ruby Taylor. Ruby Taylor is a very interesting book. I believe that Ruby Taylor should be read by all ages. Down below is my Goodreads username where I review Ruby Taylor. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.
Yeah, it's relatively funny, so Charlotte and Ruby, well done. But I've already gone very in depth about why I like this book so much. So yeah, if you want the details as to why I love this book so much, just watch my last video, I guess. Coming in at number 4, I actually found this book quite difficult to place on my top 10 because I love it so much, but I don't think it could quite make my top 3, which is why it's the number 4 spot. And that's The Stand. The Stand is the longest book I've ever read. This copy, I believe, is 1,327 pages long. Did it need to be this long? No. Was the story good? Absolutely. It took me so long to read this book. I think it took me about 8 months, which is mental. I think the reason for that is I was reading certain books in between because this book is so slow moving, because it's massive, but it's quality story. The miniseries that they made out of it in the 90s wasn't the best, but the book probably is one of the best, and I think if you have way too much time on your hands, it's the perfect book to read. It's not really scary, it's more of a dystopian novel, and it's really, really good. So, entering my top 3 favourite Stephen King books of all time, and number 3 is The Green Mile. So, The Green Mile is not horror at all. It is in no way scary, but the reason why I love this book so much is the writing. It's probably the best writing I've ever seen Stephen King put on paper, and I know I said that about The Institute in my last video, but the story didn't massively capture me. I mean, it's a brilliant story, but there are definitely better stories. It's just the writing was so good, and the movie's good, but the book, I couldn't say enough good things about it. It's absolutely brilliant. Oh, I have a problem. Okay, so my second favourite Stephen King book of all time just so happens to be It. So I think I might be a little bit addicted to collecting different editions of it. I've got this copy, which I've been holding upside down the whole time. Ha. I think the main reason this isn't my favourite Stephen King book, it was, but then I realised that there is a book that I had read that was better, which is my number 1 spot. But this book is so overly talked about, I've just kind of got sick of it, but I think it's safe to say that this book is absolutely brilliant. This copy right here is about 1,370 pages. I have other copies, let me show you them now. So this is probably my favourite copy. The text is unbearable, but it's brilliant. It's the It Chapter 2 movie tie-in. I didn't really like the movie that much. This one is the 2017 movie tie-in. I absolutely love that movie, so I was really disappointed when It Chapter 2 came out. I mean, it's not the worst, but it definitely could have been better. It's really battered, like, just look, and pages are yellowed and slightly green, I have no idea why. And this is my most recent copy that I obtained, it's this one. So looking at it for the first time, you might think it's a first edition, which it has the same cover as the UK first edition, but it's not actually a first edition. It is a second printing from 1988, but I absolutely love this cover. You can tell it's old, and I love when books do this. It's got the massive black and white author picture on the back. But yeah, this book is brilliant. That's why I have so many copies of it, because it's amazing. I wouldn't get 1,000,000 copies of a book if I didn't like it. So coming in at number 1 on my list has got to be Misery. Misery was the 3rd Stephen King book that I ever read. This is the copy that I read. I've got another copy right here, and oh my god, I cannot say enough good things about this book. It's really short. This copy is 369 pages, and this book still haunts me to this day, because this could happen. This is a completely realistic book. There is not a single supernatural element in this book. It's just terrifying. Considering that there's only 2 characters in this book and only 1 setting, a bedroom, you'd think that this was one of Stephen King's weaker novels, but people who say that couldn't be more wrong, because this book is so scary because it's real. This could happen. That's why it's terrifying. I was not expecting this when I picked up this book. When I picked up this book, I had absolutely no idea what was going to happen in it. And I think that's the best way to approach Stephen King's books, having absolutely no idea what's going on. That's exactly what I did with this, and it's terrifying, and I wasn't expecting it, but it is so good. And after I finish the Dark Tower series, I'm going to read them all in publication order, all of Stephen King's novels, all in publication order, and I'm very looking forward to getting to the 1987 era because I get to read my favourite Stephen King book again. Mug. Okay, so that is it for my top 10 favourite Stephen King novels of all time. I really hope you enjoyed the video. So if you enjoyed the video, please like the video, subscribe to my channel, and comment down below some video ideas that you would like to see on this channel. That could be a review, could be my least favourite Stephen King books, definitely doing that soon. Yeah, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time for another video. Bye! Like it with my, no, that is completely irrelevant.